estate development, living in Northern California, and I've worked all around the world in over 65 countries I've developed. Thank you.
Hi. Hi, my name is Jacqueline Allen. I work in corporate sustainability and ESG for plant-based meat company Beyond Meat, and have a background in sustainability consulting as well as sustainability and fashion. It's great to be here.
Yeah. Okay, my name is Marsha Lynn Carter. I am a senior administrative coordinator at a university, and I work with the marketing department.
All right, that's good. Thank you.
My name is Roger Nuremberg. I'm a retired from the paper and packaging business, and have had some global experience as well. Thanks.
Hey, thank you so much, Executive Board of Cargill. We are the CoreFour, and this is a sustainable future for palm oil. So, I'm Giant Steele, the strategy expert.
I'm Micah Bale, the financial analyst.
I'm Dasha Krimmer, the industry expert.
And I'm Jessica Kishuti, the market specialist.
So, our pitch takes 5 distinct points: our introduction, our analysis, our strategy, our financials, and our conclusion. So, you guys said it best with your sustainability mission statement. Your goal is to provide the world's most sustainable food supply chains. However, inherent to the industry of palm oil, there are a couple of problems in sustainability. So, in sustainability, we want to provide a bit of a primer. There's a lot of times that sustainability is thrown around without a hard definition. We aim to define sustainability in the same words as the United Nations. Sustainability means providing for the needs of future generations while Sustainability means providing for the current while without compromising the needs of future generations.
So let's get into what palm oil is. Palm oil is a vegetable oil that's extracted from oil palms. It can only be grown within 10 degrees of the equator, and it has many properties making it very popular. Because of that, it's found in a variety of different goods, probably ones you haven't even known that had palm oil. In fact, it is found in over 50% of all supermarket products. Here we see a variety of different brands we use every single day, and all of them have a common denominator. Each of these products has palm oil as an ingredient. Now let's look over here. We have Nutella, a fan favorite, Crest, Colgate toothpaste, Tide detergent, popcorn. How many of these products have you used in the last week? And did you even know they had palm oil in them? Now we can look at sustainable brands. They've pledged towards sustainability, Ben & Jerry's, 7th Generation, and they still heavily rely on palm oil production. As you can see, palm oil production has been increasing with global demand, with a 5% annual compound growth rate and $76 billion of market size currently. We need to have a sustainable option to what's going on in the palm oil industry. Now, of course, with that comes a variety of different concerns, not just for the industry, but for Cargill specifically. We're going to be talking about deforestation, biodiversity loss, and labor ethics.
Fantastic, thank you, Dasha. Now, starting off with deforestation, the palm oil industry contributes to 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions, 10% of the global deforestation due to the palm oil industry, and contributes to 2 to 4% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. Just to put that in perspective for you guys, that is the equivalent of every single car in the United States of America, and that leads to it being considered one of the most environmentally unfriendly ways to produce any sort of oil for market goods. Now, looking here, you guys can see the impact of deforestation in Indonesia. It's something that is not sustainable. Over time, it will slowly take more of that land. It is something we will not be able to progress for long.
Now we're going to be talking about biodiversity loss. We can see here that 193 species are in danger. This is in Southeast Asia, Central and South America, and various parts of Africa. We have orangutans, chimpanzees, elephants, tigers, all at risk from palm oil production.
Now addressing labor ethics. This industry is well known for having excessive hours, unsafe standards, and worse, child labor. Now, this has been a long-sided issue that Cargill has partaken in, and this has caused over $45 million in lawsuit and violations when it comes to labor ethics. Now, going into a case study, Cargill has also faced a major penalty from the EPA for violations, totaling over $130 million due to its carbon emissions, and this is because of their oilseed plants in the United States. And as a result, Cargill has had to pay over $220 million in lawsuit payouts since 2000, which is a hefty sum for this industry.
So let's talk about the palm oil industry. Palm oil contributes to 50% of all consumer products, is occupying 10% of the world's cropland, and is responsible for 10% of the world's agricultural deforestation. but only 18% of palm oil on market is certified as sustainable by the Roundtable for Sustainable Palm Oil, the world's leading certifier in sustainable palm oil. In total, yearly, palm oil is responsible for 500 million metric tons of carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere yearly through its growing practices. So, of course, an industry this large and this controversial doesn't go without regulation, and across the world, regulators are cracking down on palm oil and ensuring it is more sustainable. In the European Union, the Deforestation-Free Act, it ensures that all palm oil products sold in the European Union are deforestation-free, which is very difficult given the current nature of the industry. In Indonesia, the Roundtable for Sustainable Palm Oil, mentioned previously, has also raised their bar for sustainable palm oil certifications. In Indonesia, the largest grower of palm oil, the Environmental Impact Assessment standard has also raised, and here in the United States, the Forest Act, which is moving through Congress, also follows in the footsteps of the European Union in raising the bar for sustainable palm oil. Of course, we have to address the newly walked-in elephant in the room, which is to say international trade. International trade has become increasingly volatile in recent years, and recently, the world's largest palm oil producers have been levied with enormous tariffs. Indonesia, responsible for 58% of the world's palm oil production, has been hit with a 32% tariff, and Malaysia, responsible for 24% of the world's palm oil production, has been hit by a 24% tariff. So, in total, they contribute to more than 80% of the world's palm oil production, compiling to $32.8 billion in tariffs levied specifically against Indonesia's palm oil. So, international trade has become more volatile, and Cargill, a domestic producer and supply chain company, needs to ensure that they're able to create domestic products without being contingent to the whims of international trade.
So let's get back to Cargill. Cargill is the largest privately owned company in America and has pledged itself towards sustainability. It has a huge presence in the agriculture business with revenues over $160 billion in 2024, over 160,000 employees, and operating in 70 countries. As you can see, it's very, very prominent in the palm oil industry. In fact, the CEO has come out and said that there needs to be sustainable change through innovation and partnerships, and we know that the solution is through that.
It's important to understand how our partners perceive palm oil. So Cargill is partnered with all these companies here, and I also want to focus on an international lens with Tesco. All of these brands understand how contentious palm oil is and how it's perceived in its products, which is why all of them have a shared goal of having 100% responsibly sourced palm oil, which is really important to consider how Cargill can align their product with its partners.
Now, it's important in this industry to be looking at who you are affecting, so we will do a stakeholder analysis. First, looking at the primary stakeholders, which are 1, the shareholders, 2, the consumers, both the business-to-business consumers and the end-goal consumers, also the regulatory bodies, and then finally, we are looking at the communities within that 10-degree mark of the equator where palm oil is most generated and where it all comes from.
So this industry is clearly awry with challenges, but we found a glimmer of hope in the industry in the form of C16 Biosciences. So C16 Biosciences is a tiny New York-based firm that's completely mission-driven to replace the palm oil industry with sustainable alternatives. They, with their engineers, were able to genetically modify yeast to create an oil which is molecularly identical to palm oil and can be generated in a scalable lab. What they've created is a product that is just recently coming to market and market tested, consumer approved, and requires 0 land use, 0 deforestation, and complete scalability. So with C16, we see the beginning of a solution.
So as we were talking about in Cargill's mission statement, C16 is very closely tied to that. They want to create sustainability options that bring better solutions to consumers, which is what the demand shows.
So, over the course of our pitch, we aim to address 2 main United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Sustainable Development Goal 12, Responsible Consumption and Production, and Sustainable Development Goal 15, Life on Land. Secondarily, we've identified 2 extra goals which we achieved through our implementation procedure, which is climate action and decent work and economic growth. So, we adopted the framework of Michael Porter, a prominent Harvard Business School professor and co-founder of Deloitte and FSG. So, he believes in a shared values framework, which identifies points of intersectionality in the direction of sustainable business. So in our pitch, we found an intersectionality between societal needs, corporate assets, expertise, and business opportunities.
Thank you, Jay. Now, going into a SWOT analysis for both Cargill and C16, I'll start off with the strengths of Cargill. They are the nation's largest private company, which means they have a lot of capital to work with, and they do not have many shareholders that they have to particularly attest to. They also have a global supply chain that is almost unmatched. It is very widespread, and they're also fantastic at scaling their product.
Now to weaknesses. As mentioned earlier, of all the lawsuits, it has created a negative brand perception for Cargill, which is why it has a bad reputation and that is a big consideration for its brand.
Now looking forward to the opportunities that Cargill has, they could really step into this role as leaders in the synthetic palm oil market, and they can also capitalize on cap and trade through the land that they already have, looking towards the future.
And because it is the agricultural industry, any new technology is bound to disrupt the industry, which is why it is a major threat for Cargill.
Now moving on to the SWOT analysis for C16, starting with the strengths, what they have is a paradigm-shifting technology with their palm oil alternatives. This is something that is driven by their mission and is fully sustainability-based.
However, they are hamstrung by capital. This is a relatively new company founded in 2017, still going through investment rounds. So they have a difficult time upscaling their product owing to the fact that they have to meet the demands of shareholders and stakeholders on a year-to-year basis in achieving their goals.
The goals between these two companies are very highly intertwined, with the opportunities for C16 needing to be scaling their product, and also a very big and the greatest opportunity is the fact that they can produce this anywhere in the world. This does not have to be within 10 degrees of the equator. It does not need to be in any country in particular. This can happen anywhere in the world.
So the threats facing C16 are in a way also opportunities. They, of course, have at present a higher nominal production cost than the existing palm oil industry in its traditional sense. That's because they have to use a lab and their upfront costs are significantly higher. But they do not suffer from the negative externalities that are inherent in the palm industry. They're not paying restitution suits, they're not purchasing land, and they're not sending palm oil across the world to be refined. A potential weakness also within the industry is their existing intellectual property. C16 is a tiny company with an incredible technology which has the opportunity to disrupt an enormous incumbent industry. But we see this not as a threat, but an opportunity. So, our executive summary, how can we combine the leveraging power of Cargill, which aims to improve its sustainable palm oil industry, and C16 Biosciences, which has this incredible technology which has the potential to revolutionize palm oil? We see an opportunity between the two in the form of a joint venture between the two to accomplish Sustainable Development Goals 12 and 15. What does that look like? We propose Neopalm. Neopalm would be a joint venture between Cargill and C16, combining exclusively their palm oil aspects. This will take 3 points: a formation of a strategic joint entity, an exclusive technology partnership, and investment in future prospects. So let's talk about it. The first step is Cargill and C16 focusing the palm oil aspects of their individual industries exclusively into a joint venture company, Neopalm.
The second step is C16 receiving a 60% equity stake in this new joint venture, allowing them to continue and really help their mission flourish while not getting away from their values and their purpose, allowing them to push it where they want the mission to go.
Cargill, in the meanwhile, will gain exclusive distribution rights to C16's biotechnology for 10 years, allowing them to revolutionize the industry and to take advantage of a first mover.
Thus resulting in Cargill being the dominant force in this new subsector of the industry, being synthetic palm oil. Now moving on to the exclusive technology partnership. So the very big part here is the difference between the exclusive licensing and open licensing. The better option for Cargill, for you guys and for C16, is to go with this exclusive partnership, looking first at the intellectual property control. When C16 has it on their own, they cannot do very much with it. If they're going to all these different companies, it will fragment the market, which will not bring it to the market quick enough. Next is market penetration. It'll grow a lot faster with Cargill in the mix. You guys have a fantastic supply chain, as we already mentioned, and you guys can really push this to the next level. The profit margins will be much higher, again, due to lack of competition, and it'll be less inefficient when working with one company in particular. And finally, the strategic long-term value that both these companies will be gaining is tremendous, not just for those first 10 years, but beyond as well.
So, our investment in future prospects. This is not an opportunity for Cargill to have to restitute itself and reduce itself in the market, but instead a combination of market opportunities due to new technology, including cap and trade. So Cargill at present isn't the world's largest holder of palm oil lands, but they have over 51,000 acres. We believe that if they're able to keep existing rainforest holdings in Indonesia and Malaysia and turn them back into existing rainforests They will be able to create strong carbon sequestering rainforest ecosystems, continuing to enfranchise the local communities which have previously worked on their industries. We believe that over 10 years, Cargill, through its sequestration and carbon cap and trade selling, can make $51 million in additional revenue from its existing land holdings while combining to create a more sustainable Indonesia and South Asia.
Now, looking at the competitors in the industry, C16 is the youngest firm in this sector. But in the time that it has been around, it has been able to scale much faster than other companies. And this is largely due to a $20 million venture capital investment from Bill Gates and also its very strong Ivy League grad talent pool. In comparison to other companies have been around longer, but have been unable to really have a product come to market and really change the palm oil industry. So going into why C16, it is because of its domestic production capacity, its scalability and commercially proven product, and its shared ESG and palm oil initiatives. To get into the domestic production capacity, it is important for Cargill to really make sure that they're meeting the demand of the American market, which means that they are able to fully produce all the demand available in America without having to front all the costs of international trade. Then going into the scalable and commercially proven product, they've already created this synthetic palm oil, and it is a proven and true product. Finally, going to shared ESG, C16 is solely focused on palm oil, unlike the other competitors which are also focusing on some other things. This is really important because it really shows the alignment between Cargill and C16 when it comes to changing the palm oil industry.
Now, why you guys? Why Cargill? Shown here on this graph on the left, it goes through the 4 processes in palm oil production, starting with the production, processing, refining, and then distribution. The 2 other major players in this industry are Wilmer International and Sime Darby. And as you can see on the far left, for each section, that is the amount that they have in the actual production of palm oil. That is their market share. The market share for you guys is tremendously lower, but you guys are heavily involved in every other part of the industry. You're market leaders in everything else. And what this synthetic palm oil will be doing is replacing the processing section of this supply chain. So with that, it is very important that for Wilmer and Sime Darby, if we partnered with them, they would have to get rid of large holdings. And we find it a much stronger strategy to start with you, as you can be market leaders. You can show that this is possible. You can show it's feasible. You can show that this is the future, and they will be forced to follow suit once you guys really bring this into effect.
So why do we trust C16? They have a consumer arm called Palmless where they've in real time implemented this synthetic palm oil that has been around for centuries. So here they have a product called Pangea with their own patented oil. It's on the market and has passed the legal grounds necessary. We really want to scale this and bring it to a broader context and implement it on a broader scale of palm oil production.
You're probably wondering how this fits into existing products that already have palm oil. And I want to assure you that the synthetic palm oil completely translates into products already, and especially ones we've already mentioned, such as soaps, detergents, and popular brands. It is an exact replica fit. And going into our implementation timeline, we expect this to be roughly 5 years of implementation, really focusing on the strategic entity formation, exclusive technology partnership, and finally, sustainable ecosystem integration.
Perfect. Now, this strategy sounds great and all, but does it work financially? Starting off, we will analyze each prong of our approach, starting with the analysis of the joint venture. So the actual investment will take 3 different parts. 20% of it will be going into legal costs, such as contracts. 40% will be going into facility costs, such as the installation of the new equipment. And that final 40% will be going into different aspects of the operations, such as marketing and logistics, for a total investment of $50 to $100 million in the first 5 years of this joint venture. Now, as you can see, this is a revenue projection and profit projection for this joint venture for the first 10 years of its existence. It will reach $1.3 billion estimated by the end of 10 years, with a $600 million profit based on estimates given based on other biotech companies that have done similar groundbreaking research and implementation. So how do you guys fit into play here? You guys would be investing $30 to $50 million into this joint venture startup. In exchange, you'd be getting a 20 to 30% into an internal rate of return. Now, moving on to exclusive technology partnership. So that initial investment is worth more than just getting this company off the ground. What it is also doing is allowing to avoid royalty costs that are typically involved with these startup biotech companies. Especially for biotech, there's roughly a 5 to 10% royalty that is given on all of these different licensing fees. And because Cargill is giving this, on average, $40 million investment, they are giving C16 what they need, and they are also going to, you guys are going to be receiving the benefit of having a $240 million value added to your back-end financials. Moving on, you guys also receive a first mover advantage, which is the strongest aspect of this pitch. The synthetic palm oil market is expected to grow to up to $3 billion by 2030. And with this 10-year, essentially non-compete clause, what you guys will be doing is getting up to a 40% market share in this new industry. So year over year, for the future, you'll be getting up to $800 million in revenue, which will result in $160 million of annual profit with a 20% profit margin, which is very standard for biotech companies and startups. Now, moving on to the overall financial benefits, here's an overview of it. So with the $240 million that is saved from not having to pay those royalties for the first 10 years, coupled with the $800 million that you will be receiving from a first mover advantage, this will result in an upside of over $1 billion for you guys. Now, moving on into investments for future prospects. So after year 10 is when this joint venture takes a pause, and it's a hitch in the road where it could be gone in multiple directions. Starting with retaining the joint venture, both C16 and Cargill could choose to maintain their strategy as it is. Alternatively, they could independently scale, so Cargill could go and they could use and license their product, and C16 would be receiving that 5% royalty thereafter. Alternatively, Cargill could buy out C16 for their technology in the palm oil industry itself, and then C16 can go and look at their other ventures into alternative palm oils for other markets. But what we suggest is sticking with the independent scaling and that 5% royalty. What this will show for each over years 11 through 20 for Cargill to start is a $2.3 billion per year added revenue for years 11 through 20, a $460 million profit per year, as well as a total of $4.6 billion over the course of years 11 through 20. For C16, there will be revenue of $115 million per year, and then there will be around $15 million in costs, which will just be operational and making sure that they're keeping up this technology, keeping it up to pace. They'll be kind of taking a sideline approach with Cargill taking a higher stake in this, which will result in a total profit of $1 billion over years 11 through 20. Now, looking at the overall benefit to cost analysis, as you can see on the left, there will be a total of $5.05 billion to $6.05 billion revenue gained from this joint venture alone, and the costs are very low compared to this, with $50 to $100 million for that initial investment. These scale and production costs will be $100 to $200 million, and then just to maintain that compliance and making sure everything is sustainable, it'll be between $150 million to $250 million, which pales in comparison. And the important factor here is that you guys are not simply investing in something that will be good for your company that may be at a loss for profit. This has a tremendous impact on your bottom line.
Now into other alternatives we considered. Our criteria for our recommendation was to have a strong market position that was sustainable, product innovation, and found a strong CSR alignment. So we really weighed the feasibility and impact of different solutions, and were able to eliminate outright purchasing of C16, carbon offset initiatives, non-exclusive licenses, and developing the technology in-house to prove that our joint venture solution with C16 is really the strongest suggestion that Cargill can take.
So, to conclude, this has been a lot of information and a little bit of time, but we see this pitch as a perfect combination between C16 and Cargill's market synergies. Cargill has enormous capital and is not constrained by traditional stake or shareholders in the way that a public company would be, and C16 has an incredible paradigm-shifting scalable technology. By joining together and creating Neopalm, Cargill can expand into the sustainable palm oil market, aligning with its values, while allowing C16 to expand into the market they're designed for. We hope that Neopalm is the future of palm oil. We are incredibly excited about this venture, and we would love to talk about it with you. Thank you so much.
What questions?
Thank you. come about, why palm oil, and everything in the world would led to that?
So palm oil is really interesting because a lot of different seed oils, which are not as prominent, palm oil first of all has the largest market share of any seed oil in the world. But the other thing that's interesting about it is that palm oil doesn't have the opportunity to be grown anywhere. You can't decide to start growing palm oil in California. It's a tropical plant, and the only places you can grow it are within 10 degrees of the equator, which means that all of the world's palm oil is grown in areas which have traditionally been rainforests. So you can't have a more antithetical industry to sustainability as is. Palm oil is necessary in almost half of the products that we currently consume, but it can't be produced domestically. So we thought, how can we find a way to allow American domestic producers to supply palm oil, which is desired by all people, basically, especially producers, while allowing to stay sustainable. So there's other seed oils that we could have gone into, but if we're looking at rapeseed, if we're looking at sunflower oil, it can be grown elsewhere and it can be grown more sustainably. But it really just isn't feasible to sustainably grow palm oil. Secondarily, the fact that it has such a large market share means that the industry will eventually reach a dead end. The world's middle class is growing, and they're going to demand the same products that are currently being consumed in the United States and Europe. We see a point in time where the palm oil industry, as is, currently falls out of alignment with consumer needs. It's sort of a Malthusian conclusion, but it is the truth. We don't think that by the time the African and Southeast Asian middle class goes to the point where they need to consume as much palm oil as we currently do, that it'll be feasible long term. So we see the best solution as a scalable domestic solution. You can have this synthetic palm oil grown at any point in time, anywhere in the world, and allowed to be produced domestically. Furthermore, international trade is becoming increasingly volatile, and this is something that we really did take into account even before the recent tariffs which occurred, which sort of solidified our point. We think that palm oil, in a domestic sense, allowed to be grown anywhere without labor loss, without land use, is an incredible opportunity, especially for cargo. We thought that it was well positioned. Whereas, talking about cargo, it would be easy to pitch to a company that is completely dedicated to sustainability and has checked all the sustainability boxes, but we wanted to go after a company that is maybe not the best in terms of reputation. We think cargo has the most opportunity to expand into a market and be more sustainable and move in a direction to allow it to be not only a massive conglomerate, but a sustainable company specifically within palm oil. I hope that answers your question.
It does, thank you. So in essence, you picked something that of all the companies have the highest impact with the world and the greatest opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hi, great job. Quick question about how it actually works. So at the beginning, I think you said it was a GMO based oil, and then now it's a synthetic oil. So I guess I'm just trying to understand, because now it sounds like it doesn't need the land. So is it lab grown essentially, and it's synthetically grown in the lab?
It's fermented yeast.
It's fermented yeast.
Absolutely. So palm oil isn't something that is just extracted directly. It's grown from a tree, and then from the tree oil, palm oil is derived and extracted and refined. So it's a refinement process as is currently. So this is just using different inputs to arrive to the same conclusion. It's still growing a yeast in a lab. Sorry, I guess we weren't clear enough about that. It is a lab-grown product, first of all. So using this genetically modified yeast, they're able to create an oil which can be refined to be molecularly identical to palm oil without any of the land inputs or the trees.
Okay, so then with that, my follow-up question is, I imagine when you're writing an ingredient in the ingredients, I don't think you could say palm oil, we need to say it's synthetic palm oil or something like that. And I'm just curious if you've thought through if there's any implications to having, with people's perceptions of the product.
Actually, yeah, we have talked about that. So in our appendix, we have an insight into the sustainable foods market, which is growing increasingly. But Cargill is a domestic producer, and they're able to produce primarily for United States producers. So people have an increased demand for products that they can know are sustainable in their consumer products. So there's a lot of people, as is, who will refuse to buy certain products because they understand the harms associated with the palm oil industry. We think that this is a great opportunity. Of course, the term synthetic or lab-grown or yeast might have some sort of negative connotation, but the truth of the matter is we're providing the same product without any of the harm. This is a greener direction. So we actually don't see this as a downside at all, but in fact a large opportunity to advertise Nutella, now palm oil free, laundry detergent, now palm oil free. You're getting consumers a product they already enjoy and not giving them any downside, as well as the fact that we believe that with scalability, we're able to provide a cheaper product long-term for consumers. So we really don't see a downside in this direction. I hope that answers your question.
It does, thank you.
just have a question regarding, actually a couple questions. So we're talking about the complete eradication of palm oil and replacing it with this synthetic oil that is more sustainable for the world. Okay. What do you propose we do with the thousands of workers who rely on the production of palm oil? Are you going to say that we should redirect them to work in a lab?
So
It's kind of a
I
crazy.
was curious about that, looking at things holistically.
Yeah.
Have you thought about what happens to the industry, along the tropic?
So of course we consider that, but we have to keep in mind the palm oil industry as it is incredibly exploitative, and although it's an employment opportunity, it's not one that's sustainable long term, and it's not one that ultimately benefits internal producers. The farmers are not the people making money. As Jessica demonstrated earlier, wages are extremely low and labor exploitation is extremely prevalent. So the existing palm oil, the good thing about it is where it exists is an area that has its own profit potential. So we took the case study of Costa Rica and Brazil, which are producers in rainforest areas, which have begun the direction of rectification. So Costa Rica is one of the most sustainable conservation areas in the world, and with the Lula regime, Brazil has moved in a more sustainable direction as well. So what we see is an opportunity to move in a new direction in the form of rainforest tourism and cap and trade. A rainforest growing and sequestering carbon on its own is worth far more per hectare than a palm oil agricultural operation, especially considering the fact that soil loss is really prevalent, and after a couple of years of growth, you're not able to make money, and a lot of the money leaves the area for domestic producers in the Western world. So if we're able to, this would of course be our first step in the direction. We chose Cargill specifically because they didn't have enormous land holdings, but still significant enough land holdings to provide a sort of primary exploration into the direction of rainforest conservation. So Indonesia and Malaysia, which are the primary producers of palm oil, are incredible areas of biodiversity with 193 species of note and things that people would like to see. We think that if we're able to make people who previously have been growing palm oil into, stewards of their land and people capable of maintaining healthy biodiverse rainforests, we're able to bring Western consumers in, and in fact bring Western money into these areas which are significantly less wealthy and provide their industries. There's some precedents involved for this. In Indonesia, the shark fishing industry, which is almost a one-for-one comparison in the marine sector, was able to, they were able to train shark fishermen to be shark tourism ambassadors, and they were able to raise profits in villages by allowing them to bring Westerners out to see the incredible diversity of their area instead of having an exploitation-based industry which is inherently not sustainable long-term.
I would like to build on that. So also looking at your initial point you made, so looking at a complete turnaround, a complete switch from fully traditional to fully synthetic, it won't start out that way. It won't change overnight. There aren't all these machines that are ready to ship out to all these countries and immediately displace all these workers. It gives time for something like Jahin mentioned to really spread. It gives time for people to relocate, find new jobs, as well as the fact that to start out, we are starting with Cargill because of those small land holdings. They can test that out, do with it what they will, and then after that, these other companies will see what they're doing, and then have a chance to change what they are doing and find new ways. And it's really to show the proof of concept with Cargill. That's the proof of concept. In post-proof of concept, other companies will see this and they'll be inspired by it, hopefully, or they will be driven to change by government regulations or sustainability regulations. Yes.
And sort of the final, sorry, I'll be trying to be quick, I'll try to be concise. The final point is that Cargill, the palm oil market, the regulations that exist given the state of the industry, so it's as sustainable as possible considering that it's an unsustainable industry. If we're able to bring synthetic palm oil to the market, we will be able to work with legislators and regulators to make legislation globally about palm oil less focused on exploitative agriculture and more focused on synthetic palm oil, because it will be an existing market-proven alternative and move in a more sustainable direction through time.
Thanks, great job today. I've got a few questions. So first I wanted to cover the aspect of FDA. It looked like a lot of the C16 is like detergents and soaps. Where are we on FDA approval for day in and day out food products?
So it hasn't been scaled to food products yet. That's kind of what we want to try out. It's currently being used in that patented oil, so it's used for skincare right now and cosmetics. But because they've already patented that and that's already on the market, we believe we can take that to a broader scale, implement that on a broader scale.
And the other thing about it is, so C16 is very small, and there is, a progressively higher bar for approval through FDA approval. So, if you're going to have a topical product, it isn't going to require the same level of approval as a consumable product. And C16 doesn't have access to supply chains for food. They are not capable of acting as a distributor in the way that Cargill is. So they're able to create a product that was brought to market, and they're able to prove that this is a product which is identical to palm oil in its molecular structure and operational ability. It's the same type of soap, the same type of product, different input, but they're not able to be brought to a food market as is, but the product is the same. That's what Cargill is so well positioned for, in the sense that they have the existing food supply chain. So, of course, in our industry and upscaling, we would take advantage of existingly approved products, so that would be topical soaps, detergents, so forth, so on. But as we move through legislative approval, since the product is sound and the product is the same as it would be otherwise, we aim to quickly move the regulatory process. We actually have in our executive summary a scaling of how we would have this accomplished. And Jessica can talk about it a little bit more.
What we really wanted to focus on was just having that integration process, especially with the uniting of C16 and Cargill. It's really important to be able to align the objectives of the two missions. One of the big things that we wanted to consider when it came to C16 is because it is a smaller company with a lot of concentration of very educated grads, we want to allow them the autonomy to still, be innovative with something that they're very clearly passionate about. So that's kind of a part of the integration and development. Whereas for a test product on the market, kind of just getting it on the market, with the Palmas, it kind of has already entered it in that sense. But with Cargill scaling, maybe we could do it in a smaller alignment. And then analyzing market response, as mentioned, with whether or not we would market this as like a synthetic palm oil, and how consumers might react to that on the products themselves. We could be able to really fine-tune how we can market these products in a way that consumers would very much be willing to take it on and see it as a complete translation of normal palm oil.
And if you gave us an inch and we took a mile with this one. But if I may add one more point. It is particularly a business-to-business transaction. So this will be going to companies like P&G, Nestle, and these other big corporations, and they're the ones that will be implementing it into their products. And I would like to draw a comparison to a case that we actually did earlier this year about lab-grown meat. Speaking on the FDA approval section of it, that is somewhere where if you're looking at something that is made in a lab or in a contained setting, it doesn't have to go through the supply chain, all the shipments, and that's where the majority of the diseases and everything like that get into products. So when it is made in a lab, it is in that contained atmosphere. It's not going to have all these other outside factors hitting it, and it is, once again, molecularly the same product. Does that answer your question, hopefully?
Yeah. So a couple follow-up questions just on the manufacturing process. What is the price of a gallon of palm oil today? I mean, what's the, by chance?
So we do know the price per ton.
Price per ton.
So
Okay,
that would be, it's around $500 to $700 right now per ton of palm oil. And looking forward, I guess hopefully anticipating one of your questions, with the synthetic palm oil, that is something that over time, I'm drawing a blank on the name of the rule right now, but essentially these startup companies with this biotech, their costs typically are reduced by 30% each year. So that is something that over time, it is a very well understood concept that these things are really driving their costs lower and lower, which is a very important aspect for these companies. Right now, we estimate it by the end of that year 20, it'll get down to the $700 to $900 range, as well as the fact that there are people, like that last slide showing the consumer love for sustainability.
Right.
You can charge a slight premium, at least for the start, if you want to. As well as the fact for Cargill, if they're the ones selling it, if they want this to really get out to market, they're a private company. They can incentivize by selling it at a cheaper rate to these companies, encourage companies like Procter & Gamble to start a new line of products that use sustainable palm oil. And that is somewhere that once it gets out there, they will continue to sell it, it'll grow, it'll scale, and then they can produce more and more and give more to these companies.
So one last question, then you're $500 per ton. The bio waste from this product, is this one of these Tesla lithium battery moments where they're getting one thing good here, but they're getting thousands and thousands of tons of some mystery waste on the other end?
So if I may, the cool thing about it being yeast is as long as you're able to provide it with the same nutrients and inputs, it's able to produce the end product. So the excretion, if you will, from the yeast is the product which we sell. So That's not the case. The yeast is able to grow off of an algal matter, which is easy to produce and also producible in lab, and the end product is palm oil. So thus far, we've not identified any negative externalities in that point. We don't predict that in our pitch. We haven't seen anything that would point in that direction. We're able to produce this product, and this product has found success in market, and there's not been any Atlantic op-eds slanderizing C16, and we don't expect that to happen. We, of course, are not experts, and C16 is a little bit covert in their operations. They're a tiny company that doesn't want to get bought out by private equity or by an enormous company. They want to avoid that, and they want to be able to continue purchasing or moving along their mission, which is also sort of why we proposed a joint venture. They want to maintain their intellectual property, but there has not been any negative externalities, and we haven't seen any Tesla lithium-ion battery situations, and we don't expect to.
Thank you.
Of course, thank you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate your symbiotic approach, holistic, how you looked at it and the benefits to both parties, and then not just sustainable for the environment, but also sustainable for the industry and companies. I had a question during your presentation, and this is my own understanding, you mentioned that there's been $220 million in legal payouts. Can you expand on that a little bit? I'm just curious as to why. Why are they having
Jessica
to
can.
pay for legal costs?
Click that to the
Of course, yeah, this will take me clicking.
So I actually included an exact excerpt from the EPA violation that Cargill had. It caused them to have $130 million in payout, and then additional with civic penalties, which came out to probably another $3-4 million. And that is the largest lawsuit that they faced. And this is the exact quote from it, is due to underestimating emissions. So they surpassed the carbon emissions that they had set, and the government made them put carbon monitors in all their plants and everything just to be able to track it, because it was greatly underreported. And this was largely in their oilseed processing facilities in the United States, in places like Minnesota, Ohio, Midwestern states. And these total payouts, this is just since 2000, it has been $220 million. As also mentioned with the labor ethics, they had a lot of penalties when it came to workplace irresponsibility and wages. So they do employ child labor and also only pay $202.25 a day for their employees. So there's a lot of issues when it comes to not only their environmental impact, but their way of conducting their business when it comes to employment.
So palm oil is cheap right now owing to its global scale, but it has a host of costs inherent within it. You have to pay for rainforest land. You have to pay off, currently Cargill is perpetually experiencing lawsuits from the likes of environmental organizations, Greenpeace, Sea Shepherd, so forth and so on, because they have to destroy rainforest land to expand their production capacity. And aside from that, the actual inner workings of the palm oil industry are not that sustainable and not that well regulated, because they operate in rainforest areas in third world countries. So this is something that we aim to rectify. We're just trying to emphasize to Cargill that growing practices, in spite of the fact that palm oil is comparatively cheaper per metric ton, it has an enormous cost to Cargill in terms of reputation, in terms of lives affected, and in terms of legal suits. You're always going to have to pay rectification. As long as the palm oil industry exists within rainforests, there's always going to be rebuke. Every time an image of an orangutan in a cleared out field is posted, there's going to be people who are going to buy less palm oil products, hurting Cargill's bottom line, and there's going to be more people affected, more biodiversity affected, and more damage to the Earth system. So what we hope to emphasize through this is the fact that the palm oil industry is never going to be free of harm, because the area where it exists is just not a place where large-scale agriculture is compatible with large-scale monoculture. Agriculture is compatible with healthy labor practices and effective management of resources.
Thank you. And so to recap, those costs are just in the U.S. alone.
This is only in the U.S.
Yeah, only the U.S., and that's what I was curious with. And then you have the global footprint, which expands the impacts even further. And you mentioned one of your goals was the child labor. You touched on it there, so appreciate that. And that's more on the international scale, not the U.S.
Absolutely. So a lot of the litigation happens within the United States or the European Union, about growing practices which occur in the third world. You don't have so many whistleblower organizations positioned inside of Indonesia or Malaysia. There are people who are coming in and advocating on the behalf of local communities to try to rectify their working conditions or rectify biodiversity loss. So the lawsuits that occurred, there's harms, of course, within the third world where palm oil is being grown, and then there's associated harms within the refinement of palm oil. You're shipping massive amounts of these palm oil hearts and palm oil seed to be refined in the United States in cargo's factories, which in itself has a large environmental impact, and then the actual refinement releases a lot of carbon dioxide. All of that would be rectified through scalable synthetic palm oil production. It would be able to be insular, it would be able to be domestic. You wouldn't have to buy rainforest, you wouldn't have to grow palm oil, you wouldn't have to suffer workers' rights abuses, you wouldn't have to ship palm oil from Indonesia and Malaysia to the United States, you wouldn't have to process palm oil, providing environmental harm. All of those would be rectified by domestic production and scalable palm oil through the synthetic industry.
I'd also like to reemphasize that Cargill realizes they have a problem. That's why the CEO came out and said we need to change our practices, and they're looking for that innovation. And that's why we think that C16 can bring that innovation and change how palm oil looks like, because they know there is a problem.
Thank you. Question about the forest holdings that you mentioned, and that we could get, I believe, revenue from cap and trade systems and offsets. Two questions. One is if you could go a little bit deeper into how you figure we would get that kind of revenue, and two, if you thought about what's selling that land versus keeping it, getting those offsets for that land. Kind of just a little bit more into the financials and your thought process behind that.
So absolutely, cap and trade is relatively new. Cap and trade's been around in a large commercial scale for only about a decade or so, but the leading regulator is the European Union, and the current rate, cap and trade is increasingly more lucrative because the better rainforests are able to sequester carbon, the more lucrative they are on the cap and trade market. So it's usually about $10 per ton of carbon dioxide sequestered. So it's not a huge amount, but an effective rainforest, we looked at Brazil and we looked at Indonesia. If you're able to have a mature rainforest, it's able to sequester about 10 tons of carbon dioxide per year per hectare. So that number ends up being quite convenient for us because we have 51,500 hectares of existing rainforest area. By the time they're mature rainforests and able to be sustainably conserved and sold on the cap and trade market as regulated by the European Union at present, that would result in $51,500,000 in revenue over 10 years. But the truth of the matter is that it could actually be more over time, owing to the fact that, as stated previously, cap and trade becomes better regulated as time passes, and the value of rainforest increases progressively as companies like Cargill reduce the amount of rainforest available, making individual rainforest holdings more lucrative and more rare. So we hope this accomplishes. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Of course, thanks so much.
Thanks. We're going to take off our board hats right now, and wanted to give you some feedback and then have a little conversation with you as well. From my perspective, this is extremely informative. Your presentation skills were great, relaxed, very cohesive on how you integrated everybody. One thing I appreciate, particularly coming from the tech sector, is thank you. The support, the data, and you've really done your research, provide compelling data that helps to support the cause, and appreciate your holistic solution. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. This is something that we're genuinely excited about. We didn't design a pitch to accomplish a point just to try to impress judges. We spent a long time conferring. It took us almost a month to settle on a singular pitch idea because we thought we want something that we're individually passionate about. If any of us were to run into somebody from Cargill, we would be excited to talk to them about the industry that we had. And I think having a passion for it has definitely helped us in our pitch, and it's made us more excited about the opportunity to speak about this really awesome potential market solution.
It really shows. You put the thought into it, and thanks for sharing that background. I can see you going up in front of the board of Cargill. What you might want to consider is your elevator pitch. You had your 20 seconds. How are you going to throw that zinger out to really capture their thinking, that they're intrigued and want to learn more?
We're considering it as we speak.
90 seconds tomorrow.
Yeah, no, you all did an excellent job. Really thoughtful, really smart idea. You thought through every part of it, and I learned a lot, which I always appreciate. Just overall, really great job. And I would say the only thing was just during the presentation, it was really fast. So to the extent that you can kind of figure out things you don't need to say, because you're already ready for our questions afterwards, it's clear, you're ready for them, so you can even maybe pull out a little bit more just so we can follow along a little bit better. But other than that, excellent job.
Thank you so much.
I'd like to thank you for coming today. And my question was, this is actually good enough to pitch to the CEO of either company. I think it is. Have you considered that? Have you been in touch with the CEO of
C16?
Yeah?
No,
We
not yet.
Well, his picture is in your presentation, so I think it'd be a great thing for you to pursue. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. That faith that you guys have, means a lot, and it's definitely something that we're going to consider.
All right, thanks for being here today. I appreciate the presentation. I learned a lot of great things as well. I really like it when people don't have notes, right? So you were really well rehearsed. I could tell you practiced and you practiced and you practiced. So that's really important when you go in front of an executive C-suite kind of meeting. So that was really, really good. A lot of slides. I know you compressed so much information into so much little time that you had. The one thing you kind of touched on when we were talking about some costs and the carbon emissions and the emission credits and things like that. So, and then you mentioned, this is all sold by the ton, right? So the logistics expense is going to be massive, right? So maybe there's an opportunity for you to add a slide that says, hey, this is how many ships per year come from Malaysia to Port of Long Beach. Those ships use bunker fuel oil, which is the most polluting thing in the world. So if you could eliminate some of those, that might be a good add to the pitch, just saying you could save so much carbon emission just right there. So otherwise, tons of great information. The research you did was incredible, so nice work.
Thank you so much. So we did consider that. In our understanding of carbon emissions, part of the factoring of the 500 million metric tons is within shipping. But if you identify shipping individually, it's enormous. But the industry is so harmful from a carbon perspective that if we were to put it's something like 160,000 metric tons per year from the shipping alone. But if we put that number against 500 million tons, it looks a little paltry. So even if you consider the magnitude of shipping in comparison to the industry overall, it's so harmful from a carbon perspective. We left it out because we thought that it wasn't the most impactful fact that we could have brought forward over 25 minutes, but it was something that went into our consideration. And it's absolutely true. It's incredible. We definitely appreciate the feedback.
You're welcome.
And that's also based, compared to Cargill, those other two giant companies, most of those carbon emissions come from the production. And having that 2 to 3% sliver of the production market compared to these other companies, I believe Wilmer had roughly 20% of it. That is, 10 times more. That is where the vast amount of those carbon emissions come from.
The other thing I would just say, if you ever personally get a chance to go to Malaysia or Indonesia and see what's going on there and see how the people live and $2 a day and what they're wearing and how they live, it's all of us would benefit by understanding what these people are going through.
We tried to coordinate a trip to Malaysia for our industry research, but we couldn't find the time.
Couldn't get that correct. Well, Hein, it's very clear your passion for this with your course or your major. Gosh, I was curious. Switching gears here. Real estate. It's right up my alley. I was curious, why and what are you looking forward to doing with that?
Yeah, so I'm actually in the Master's in Real Estate program at the university I'm at right now. I want to go into development, so just like your alley. I'm not sure if I want to do commercial or residential. The program I'm in right now is geared towards commercial. I'm doing an internship in commercial brokerage this summer, so I'm going to be doing leasing and tenant representation. But I don't know, I've always been fascinated by real estate. My parents moved from Los Angeles, and I realized there's so many different things in other states that are so different from how I was raised here in the Valley. So curiosity grew, and it's so tangible. A lot of things in finance, you're working behind the scenes with stocks and bonds, but with real estate, all this investment comes to life, and you can go see it physically. And I love, you work so hard when you could see it. So.
Excellent. Wish you well. And there's so many different aspects within real estate, and commercial is very complex there. So.
What kind of development are you doing?
Corporate real estate development. So develop 65 countries, large campuses to one-offs and ground-ups. And what I love about it is working with people, learning the culture, learning the unique local regulations, and then how do you take a baseline fundamentals and then apply it and then actually get things to work. And in the tech industry, long-range plan is 6 months, and the ground-up takes 4 years, typically, unless you're in San Francisco. And then how do you apply that to turn things around very quickly and get very creative in your solutions? And that you got a whole team you work with, all of the functions you mentioned.
I'd love to speak further about it whenever you have one.
Absolutely. Share contacts and worked in all aspects of it.
Perfect.
Happy to
Sounds good.
give you insights.
Thank you so much. We're so glad we were able to field all of your questions. And
I
thank you
was
so much.
curious with Mike, I did all of it. Is why international relations?
So,
Curious, what's your
my undergrad is in information systems, so more of that, data approach, the finances that I went through. And then I'm getting my master's in international business. So that's something, I'd really love to end up international at some point. I'm interning this summer at Procter & Gamble. I brought them up a couple times because, near and dear to my heart. I know a good amount about it there, and I think that'd be an interesting thing as well to go to them and, pitch some of these products. So that would be nice, but I'd love to end up internationally at some point, whether that is Europe, Asia, Africa. I'm very open to movement, so that's kind of the inspiration behind it.
And the PG&E will allow you to do that. You have so many different business lines there, international opportunities. I have acquaintances been in Singapore, Japan, and now moving to Switzerland, but got a grounding in Ohio to start with, in Texas.
I'm from Michigan, so that
There you go.
Ohio is not too appetizing to me.
And then I want to say, Jessica, and how about yourself?
Well, I'm currently double majoring in economics and management and hoping to pursue the master's in international business like Micah. So hopefully he'll help me out with my personal statement and all that. But I really fell in love with traveling. I came from an immigrant family, so they never had the opportunity to travel. So last year I studied abroad and got to go to many different countries, and I'm hoping to continue that with the rest of my life, just getting out there and seeing the world and seeing the differences in cultures and how things are so vastly amazing all around the world. As a career, I'm hoping to do consulting. I really like learning a lot, in depth, really deeply on small, niche topics like this. I would have never have imagined to know this much about palm oil in the industry, and yet here we are getting a presentation like this. So I'd love to continue pursuing that, and with every single presentation I do, hopefully making a better mark on the world and just making a better place than I found it.
Good. And when you align yourself with that, with your careers, it's good to get with an organization where they have good development and mentoring programs there. And the firms that you mentioned that you were interested in, some of the consulting, what that is, that gives you a good grounding to start with, to launch your career. So I wish you well, and thank you very much for your presentation and the insights you shared.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Best of luck in the rest of the day.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very